Oh, hi there. This is Chris Fernandez. This is the second video of the series of automating with IxNetwork. So in the second video here, what I'm going to try to show is how to, after you establish the session and you have a session handle, how you're going to add ports to your session, right? So in my case here, you can see the code is on the left side and the IxNetwork is on the right side. I'm going to be using the regular local host as where my session is. So I'm going to come in the session here. We saw this before, and I'm going to create a session. And as you can see here, I have clean config true. So the session, it's going to be a clean config. And I'm going to demonstrate a few items here for adding ports to a session, including the L2 settings that I can do for the ports itself, for the L1 settings for the ports itself, like changing the media type from copper to fiber and etc. I can also show check condition, which is something that we provide in terms of how you check something that is part of your IxNetwork session. It's how you look at a table that is presented on the screen. The port map assistant is something that we have embedded in our library that helps you to connect the ports to a session. The stats view, it's another tool that we use to grab information from the window that we see, like from the session itself. And also going to show you a little bit how to grab the handle, for example, after a session is established. So if you load a session how you're gonna grab the handle or how you find stuff on that session. So let's just keep going here. So I'm gonna start the automation here, and I'm gonna stop right here after I establish connection and establish a session, right? So as you can see here, I'm gonna establish a session and it's gonna be cleaned up. And now I have a session handle, which is IxNetwork session, right? So at this point here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit step in here. This dictionary here, this is just for me when I'm automating to how do I collect my handles and how do I have access to handles later. This is not necessary, but because you can always find them later, so it's just this is just a code choice, not really necessary. The library that helps you to connect ports to a session is called Port Assistant. So you call this here, you call the session Port Assistant. That gives you a handle for Port Assistant. Um, and then the code that does the add the port to the session is over here. It's this port map. So this port map, it's here, and I'm passing in the IP address of the chassis, the slot where that card is, and the port ID. So my case here, I have port 41 and a name. This name here is important. We're gonna see it later why it's important. It gives you a way to find this port really easily later. So I'm gonna just do this mapping here, which creates internally a database for the virtual ports. So as you can see, if you go under automation and then you do the web browser here, let me just bring up the session. So this is the session that I have so far. As you can see, there's no ports associated to this session, right? As I continue here on my code and I connect, so this port mapping here doesn't really do anything until I get to the connect here. So let me continue the test. So I'm just mapping. So my VMap is there. So now that I'm gonna get to the connect portion here, this is where internally the port assistant will help us to actually add the ports to the session, right? So he added the ports to the session here. The ports are in down state. But now when I look at this here and I refresh my browser, now I should have 2 ports in here, right? So it created 2 ports and connected 2 ports. Now, one tip here now, it's this now that I'm going to introduce is 2 things here. One is called start stat view assistant. So the stat view assistant, it's nothing but a way to look at a table that you have here on your session, right? So in my case here, I want to grab the statistics that's based on a port statistic table, right? So if I go into anything here, this is the table that I'm going to look at, the port statistic table. So this table here has this information here, has duplex mode and so on. And I'm going to use this to grab statistics for that table. So this port stats, I'm just going to call this. So the sports stats now have this table, has a handle to this table, and it's looking at this table. The next call here is for check condition. So check condition is my way of checking values inside of this table. So what I'm passing in is I'm passing in the column name. So I'm looking at a column that says link state. So I'm looking at this column right here called link state. And I'm doing a regular expression on it where the value says link is up. So it says link space up. And I'm doing a timeout of 20 seconds and raise condition false. In this case here, I don't need this port. Usually I don't need this. If this fails and I have raise exception set to true, it will come out the code and the code will stop. But in my case here, I'm setting to false. So I'm saying even if the port is not up, don't give up, continue, right? So don't stop the execution. So I'm going to execute here. As you can see here, the value for this port is true, right? Because the condition was met. So if I look into port, if I look at ports up here, the value for this, this should be set to true, right? Is a Boolean set to true. So the code will continue. You can look at check condition if you want to look at all the variables or the settings that you can do here in terms of timeout and stuff like that, and what's default and so on. Just make sure that you go in there and kind of find out. So now, what I'm trying to do here is to change the port. So let's say, for example, I have in my case here, I have the ports and they are using, let's see here what they are using. They're using copper. The media is copper. And I wanted to change it to fiber, for example, right? So in this case here, I'm gonna fake this here because I want this to be executed. So I'm gonna change this here to false. So I'm gonna set this both. I'm gonna set value to false. Just so I can illustrate this code here, right? So this code here is saying if the ports are not up, I'm gonna change the media from fiber to copper and so on. So first thing I gotta do is to find a card type. So if I go back into my settings here and I'm looking at the port, right? So the IxNetwork vport find, this code here will grab the two values here that I have. Now I'm gonna get a list of these guys here so I can loop through. And then I'm looking into port type. I'm looking at the port type number 1. So if I click in here, and I'm following this here, and I'm looking at the type. So inside of the type, since the since there are many cards associated with this, I can have many settings that is particular to a specific card. So what this code does here is looks into the port type, and based on that, is going to look for the correct type. So in my case here, I'm looking for this Novus 10 gig LAN here, which is the port that I have. And it's going to grab this value and it's going to uppercase the first variable here. So I'm looking at here in my code. If you look at this, so the type here is the Novus 10 gig LAN. So using this type here, I can now look inside of my L1 configuration. So if I'm going to go inside the L1 configuration, I have to go into the Novus 10 gig LAN here. This is going to be the port that I'm using. And now I can change things for that particular card, right? So that's why I'm that's why this code here is existent. So what this code is doing here now is looking into the media, so the port object. So it's grabbing the port object inside the L1 config and getting the attribute called media, right? So I'm going here and I see that the media is copper. So I'm gonna set it to fiber, right? So I'm changing this. So if the port media is set to, in this case, is copper, right? So it's gonna change to fiber and vice versa. So in this case here is right now is set to copper. So it's gonna execute this line here and change it to fiber. And that's it. Like that's all I need to do for this, right? So if I refresh this here, you can see that now I'm setting the media to fiber. And I'm gonna do that the same thing with the other port. So I'm gonna just execute this code here. Now that I set those ports, all those ports to fiber, I'm gonna check again, doing the check condition again, if my link state is up. And at this point here, I'm gonna say, all right, if it's not up for this point on, then I'm gonna get out because now I tried changing the media type and it didn't work, right? So that's what this code here did. Now, the last thing I want to show here is how to grab the port information using the find. So when you look at this table here and you have the session here, right? So let's say I have a list of IxNetwork vport, and I have vport name set to port 1. So all I need to do to grab the handle for this port here, I'm just going to have to say port handle is IxNetwork session vport find port 1, and it's going to give me the same handle. It's going to give me this handle here, so I can play around with it. Another way of doing it, let's say, for example, if I want port 2, all I have to do since I have IDE here, I have IxNet session dot vport. So in this case here, it kind of does the code for you because it already knows the the tree here, how it works. So I have networks and then vport. Just remember that the V here is capital, so it's vport, and then I can do a dot find. And all I need to do is specify now the name that I want to. I can do ID. It would find it as well. So if I do ID2, it would give me this handle, or I can say name. So in my case here is, since I know the name, I'm going to say name. And as you can see here, the code is kind of doing it for you. And then you're going to say port 2 or port 2, right? So if I execute this code here, it's going to give me the handle for port 2. So I can evaluate the expression here, right? And the result is port 2. So now if I go into my code here and I look for port 2, so port 2, it has all the information about my card here, or my specific port, including the where it's connected to, right? My port information. And so all this stuff here, now you can actually have access in your code. So anyway, this is all I want to cover on this session here. So this is how to add ports to your session, and I also showed a little bit about L1 configuration for the ports. I showed you the stat view and the check condition, which is part of the stats view library, which we can use throughout the code. And I also show how to find a handle later, or find any object inside of your session later using the find function. All right, so this is all for now. I'll post this as a second, and then we move on to the next level. All right, thanks. Bye.